On a Thursday evening, I stood in a hotel lobby, an unfamiliar city as my backdrop, clutching a cup of coffee that scalded my fingers. To clarify, I am Josh, the proprietor of a photography studio for approximately 8 years now. My line of work encompasses portraits, commercial ventures, and the occasional wedding to fill the calendar. This is no pastime, but a legitimate business. I employ 2 full-time staff members, maintain regular clients, and trust one lead photographer named Tyler with whom I've worked for the last 4 years. That Thursday, I was due to shoot a corporate event, a significant client and an ample paycheck at stake, 2 hours from home. The Meridian, a mid-range hotel downtown, was my lodging choice: clean beds, desks, free parking. I arrived Friday afternoon, checked in, left my belongings in room 412, and prepared my equipment near the window. Then came the call from the client, his message something like, "Josh, I'm terribly sorry." He suggested postponing everything until next month. He spoke sincerely, and I agreed. However, I wasn't pleased with the delay, yet I didn't feel like driving home the same night. The room had already been paid for, leaving the weekend vacant. Liz departed earlier that morning for her women's trip, a long weekend with friends from her marketing network. She had mentioned it 2 weeks prior, a getaway to a city she had long wanted to explore. Her demeanor suggested happiness about it. I didn't inquire too deeply. Instead, I opted for room service, watched a show on my laptop, and dozed off early. On Saturday morning, I woke up with no agenda. By 9, I decided to stroll down to the lobby and obtain a genuine coffee from the cafe near the entrance. Dressed casually in jeans and a gray pullover, I took the elevator, stepped out into the lobby, and headed towards the cafe. It was there that I halted. Liz stood at the front desk, approximately 30 feet away from me, engaged in conversation with the receptionist lady. She carried her compact olive green travel bag on one shoulder, the one she usually used for brief journeys. She didn't notice me. Standing beside her, holding onto a communal rolling luggage, was Tyler. I remained stationary, perhaps 4 steps from the elevator, observing. Tyler placed the suitcase down while Liz continued conversing with the woman at the desk. He said something to Liz that I couldn't catch, and she responded with an effortless, comfortable laugh. She briefly touched his arm before turning back to the counter. One shared suitcase was between them, one single piece of luggage. I retreated a step towards the elevator cluster and hid behind a substantial column close to the wall. I can't explain why I did that instead of approaching them directly. My body moved instinctively before my mind could process it. I have known Tyler for 4 years. Originally a freelance photographer I contracted for additional work, he eventually transitioned into a full-time position. He was exceptional in his craft. Not needing much guidance, he was the type of photographer clients appreciated and trusted with tasks I couldn't handle myself. Recognizing his accomplishments, I granted him autonomy over these projects. Liz had interacted with him only about a dozen times studio functions, team dinners I hosted always commenting that he was easy to converse with. This phrase didn't resonate with me until this very moment, standing in a hotel lobby, my coffee growing cold. It turns out they had both been described similarly by others, separately over time, but the connection never dawned on me. The receptionist passed us 2 room keys. Liz took one and handed the other to Tyler. He smiled and resumed carrying his luggage. They headed towards the elevators together, leaving me behind the column until their departure was assured. Glancing at my coffee cup, I noticed a tiny fracture around its edge, caused by an absent-minded thumb press. Heading towards the elevator, I hit the button for the 4th floor. Exhaustion beckoned me to rest. For some time, I remained perched on the bed's edge, the untouched coffee in my hand placed aside on the nightstand. Silence reigned within the room as the city outside the window continued with its routine Saturday morning activities, traffic humming, distant sirens wailing, and a delivery truck idling below. Picking up my phone, I read Liz's text from 814 that morning, informing me she and her daughters had arrived at the hotel and found it charming. Accompanying her message was an emoji wearing sunglasses. Initially typing, "Nice, enjoy," I opted to keep it brief. Rereading the exchange multiple times, my analytical mind began weaving possibilities. Perhaps Tyler was shooting in this city, or maybe it was a mere coincidence. Perhaps they had separate luggage. Perhaps it seemed incorrect from afar in the lobby. Maybe Liz was gathering her friends while Tyler coincidentally arrived at the same hotel for separate purposes, leading to their encounter at the reception desk. Nearly I convinced myself of this possibility. Almost, but I continually returned to the keycard. The manner she grabbed both and passed one to him didn't align with an accidental encounter with a colleague or someone who individually booked their room. Standing up, I moved towards the window. My camera bag remained on the desk, only partially unpacked. I glanced at it momentarily before looking back outside the window. I planned to return downstairs, get a proper coffee, and contemplate this situation objectively in the lobby cafe. That was my decision. I reassured myself that I wouldn't search for them. I picked up my room key and left the room. However, I didn't go to the cafe. Instead, I took the elevator down one floor, stepped out onto the third-floor hallway, and just stood there. The corridor stood vacant and silent, filled with the distinctive scent of the hotel carpet cleaner and recycled air. A cleaning cart lay parked halfway along the passage, no one in sight nearby. I strolled to the end of the hallway and returned, then descended the elevator to the lobby, passing through without pause, exiting via the side door into the hotel's quaint courtyard nestled between the main building and the parking structure. A handful of metal chairs dotted the area, along with a neglected planter that hadn't been watered. I settled in one of the chairs. My phone signaled. It was a text from Liz, informing she and her friends were off to brunch and inquiring about my well-being at home. I pondered over the message for an extended period. She wondered if all was well back home, as if that's where I resided. She was oblivious to the fact I sat barely 60 feet from her current location, within the very same courtyard behind the building. I responded with a simple, all good, before hitting send. I pondered over the past few months, recalling her late hours, attributing them to client deadlines. The journey she undertook for 2 hours to meet a new business associate that left her unusually quiet. Her habit of placing her phone face down on the kitchen counter each time she set it down. I had observed all these occurrences. I chose not to address any of them. I concocted plausible explanations for each incident, perhaps out of fear to know the truth. I returned indoors, took the elevator not up to the 4th floor but to the 6th. Uncertain of their location, I was about to uncover it. The 6th floor was deserted. I traversed the length and breadth of the hallway, then returned to the elevator. This time I pressed 5, walked that corridor too, finding nothing but closed doors and a maid's notice outside room 517 with fresh towels stacked beneath it. I was aware my actions were irrational, but I couldn't control myself from continuing. I took the elevator to the 7th floor. Merged, it was then I heard voices, not speech, from a left corridor, 2 of them emanating from somewhere down that corridor. I recognized Liz's laughter before rounding the corner, the same carefree laugh she had in the lobby. I retreated and stayed close to the elevator bank, keeping hidden from the hallway's view. I heard Tyler mention something about dinner reservations. I heard Liz reply with tonight, not lunch. A door opened and shut. Silence fell over the corridor. I hesitated, then peered down the corridor. Room 714. The light above the door handle flickered green, then switched to red as the lock was engaged. I stared at that door for a few moments. Then I returned to the elevator and descended to my floor. Room 412. I sat on the bed exactly where I had that morning, in the same spot, in the same position. The now cold coffee remained on the nightstand. I grabbed my phone and opened my contacts. Tyler's name was near the top. 3 times this week, I phoned him concerning our impending shoot on Monday. After hanging up, I had his room number, floor, and had witnessed their joint check-in with a single bag and set of keys. Yet I was left without a coherent explanation. For the better part of the afternoon, I remained in that room, not watching anything or eating. Instead, I lay on the bed with my shoes on, gazing at the ceiling. As the light outside the window transitioned from bright to the muted yellow preceding sunset, I watched it transform without truly perceiving it. At about 5:30 p.m., I rose and stood by the window, camera in hand, perhaps out of habit or a need for my hand's occupation. I aimed it at the cityscape outside and snapped a few images. The lighting was surprisingly good, offering long shadows and warm hues across the rooftops. Under other circumstances, I would have ventured outside to capture such a scene. It was the kind of light one doesn't squander. Took a single photo of the view ahead, street below, buildings opposite, sky tinged orange at edges. Peered at it briefly on camera's backscreen, then set it on desk. Phone lay on nightstand. Picked it up, initiated a new text to Tyler. Sat still, thumb hovering over keys for long moments. What to write? Mention I was here, share sightings, describe hours spent wandering hotel corridors like a man bereft of reason. Set phone down again, then picked it up again. Opened camera roll, found the clearest shot of my room number brass plate on back of door, photographed carelessly upon arrival, 412. Clear, distinct, well lit. Attached it to text. Typed brief message below, world seems small. Sent it to Tyler before second thoughts could prevail. Retrieved bag from floor, hastily packed items inside. Not in order. I gathered items from the table and countertop, hastily stuffing them into my bag, treating my camera equipment with caution. Everything else went in carelessly. I performed a quick scan of the room, charger on the bedside table, coat on the chair. I snatched both. A half-cold coffee remained untouched, and I hesitated before moving on. Stepping out into the hallway, I waited for the elevator, my bag slung over one shoulder and camera case in hand, watching the digital display tick down from 7. I contemplated Tyler on a higher floor, glancing at his phone, reading a text and my room number. I contemplated his expression during that moment, wondered what he said to Liz if anything was said. The elevator unveiled an empty chamber. I stepped in and hit the lobby button. The doors sealed shut. Upon reaching the lobby, I headed directly towards the exit that connected to the parking garage, the same route taken earlier that day. I avoided eye contact with the front desk, the cafe too. Pushing through the doorway, I traversed the ramp down to the second level where my vehicle was parked. I stored the bag in the trunk, positioned the camera case on the back seat, and took a seat. Both hands gripped the steering wheel as the engine idled. My phone vibrated, displaying Tyler's name. I watched the screen buzz until it ceased. I ignited the engine and exited the parking structure, ignoring the hotel entrance in my rearview mirror. The commute home spanned 2 hours. For about 20 minutes, the radio hummed, then fell silent. The freeway was largely vacant, a Saturday evening, traffic streaming opposite ways, each vehicle traveling to their weekend destinations while I departed from one. Drove with both hands on the steering wheel, maintaining the right lane throughout the journey. Approximately midway, I stopped at a gas station and idled in the parking lot with the engine running. Retrieved my phone and switched it completely off, not just to airplane mode. Held the power button until the screen dimmed, then placed it in the console and resumed driving on the highway. Arrived home slightly after 8. The house was eerily silent, that particular hush it gets when Liz is away for a few days. Not completely vacant, simply still. Her coffee mug from Thursday remained untouched on the counter, wet but uncleaned. Decided not to move it. Skipped unpacking. Left my bag by the front door and settled at the kitchen table. Found the overhead light too intense, so I switched it off and remained in darkness for a while with only the stove's light burning. That was our constant nighttime companion. Liz had established that habit years ago, and I hadn't considered altering it. Sat there until nearly midnight. After retiring to bed, I remained indoors the whole of Sunday. Prepared coffee in the morning. Once again found myself seated at the kitchen table. My mind wandered to thoughts of the studio, the approaching Monday, if Tyler would appear as usual after the incident, if Liz would arrive home Sunday night as planned, dragging her suitcase through the front door with tales of brunch and shopping. I pondered what I'd do when she did. Nearly 9 o'clock, I heard a key in the lock of the front door. As usual, she entered carrying her bag that collided with the door frame, keys jingling into the ceramic bowl by the entrance. I heard her greet the darkness of the hallway before finding me at the kitchen table under the stove light. She mentioned she had tried calling. I told her my phone had died on the way back. She took it without further inquiry. She seemed weary. She placed her bag near the stairs and ventured into the kitchen to fill a glass with water from the sink. She asked about how my weekend was. I informed her that the client had canceled, causing me to leave early. She expressed regret about the wasted driving. Her demeanor was the same as it had been in the lobby beside Tyler. This composure kept echoing in my mind. It wasn't anxious or guilty. Instead, she seemed relaxed. She asked if I desired tea. I declined. She prepared some for herself and sat opposite me at the table. We conversed for a brief while about inconsequential matters, such as her brunch meal and a shop she had visited. She did not bring up Tyler or anyone else by name. Instead, she talked about the girls and various things. I allowed her to speak. I didn't interject. I didn't ask probing questions. Eventually, she reached across the table and covered my hand with hers, saying she had missed me. I observed her hand on mine without responding. She retired around 10:30. I remained seated at the table. I reactivated my phone for the first time since the parking garage. It took a moment for the page to load, then 11 missed calls appeared. 6 from Tyler, 5 from Liz. 4 messages from Tyler and 3 from Liz were awaiting my attention. All of them had been sent between Saturday night and Sunday afternoon. I perused each one carefully. Tyler's messages commenced about 4 minutes after I'd forwarded him the picture. The initial message read, "Josh, that isn't what it seems." 11 minutes later, a second text arrived stating, "Give me a call, please." A third message simply said, "I can clarify." Sunday morning saw the fourth text arrive. "I apologize, I need to discuss this with you." There were no explicit details or new facts in any of the messages or the 6 missed calls, just familiar words spoken by those who have been found out and haven't crafted their explanation yet. Liz's texts differed. The first one inquired about my well-being. The second suggested that she had heard from Tyler that I might be nearby and desired to converse. Third message, received Sunday afternoon, stated, "Give me a call instead, let's sort this out." I reread that one twice. She had been contacted by Tyler. This indicated that within minutes of sending my text, he had phoned her, not to confess or apologize, but to arrange things. That piece of information felt heavy and chilly in my chest. I powered up my laptop and accessed the studio's scheduling software. The calendar for Monday showed Tyler booked at 9 a.m. for a client shoot, a small bakery portrait session I had confirmed 2 weeks ago, known as a good client with potential for repeat business. I stared at that entry for a moment. Then I opened my email and started typing. The message was concise and factual, effective from that day onwards. Final paycheck to be processed by the end of the week. Equipment to be returned by Wednesday. No need to show up on Monday. I checked it over once, made no changes, and prepared to send it. I could hear a floorboard creak upstairs, Liz stirring in bed. I pressed send. I shut the laptop, moving to the table as the kitchen windows began to darken with dawn. Ascending the stairs followed. Liz was asleep on her side, facing the wall. I hesitated in the doorway momentarily, then ventured into the closet, retrieving a blanket and pillow, later returning them to the couch downstairs. Afterwards, I slumbered for approximately 3 hours. In the ensuing morning, I became aware of her descent from above. She halted upon spotting me on the couch. Already conscious and upright, I was. Her gaze moved from the pillow to myself, evoking a subtle change in her expression. Not shock per se, but more the instant when one realizes an event they hoped wouldn't transpire has already occurred, with no chance of reversal. She took her seat in the armchair opposite me. Remaining silent for some time, she eventually expressed regret, acknowledging that it began gradually and wasn't her intent to reach this point, explaining her attempts to find a way out. Expressing continued affection for me. Listened intently without interjecting during her speech. Upon her conclusion, I mentioned I had previously released Tyler. Her eyes momentarily shut upon hearing this. I requested transparency regarding the duration of the issue, to which she responded 8 months. I acknowledged with a nod. I then gathered and folded the blanket, placing it on the couch arm, informed her that I required solitude and was bound for the studio. Questioned if we could resume our conversation once I returned. Replied uncertainly. Collected my keys and camera case positioned by the front entrance. She remained seated in the armchair as I departed without impediment. Drove aimlessly, not heading to the studio. Lowered windows and silenced the radio as the fresh morning breeze seeped through the glass. Eventually parked in a lot adjacent to a small park where I'd previously photographed. Stepped out, retrieved my camera from the back seat, and entered the park, guided by the thin, sharp light characteristic of early autumn. I picked up the camera and captured several images of the tree line over the water. More followed, then a third. They were decent shots, I knew this instantly. I continued shooting until the area became crowded with joggers and dog walkers on a Sunday morning. People strolling by in an ordinary fashion. I documented everything: the sunlight on the water, a child eating food wrapped in foil on a bench, an elderly man walking a small dog that frequently paused to sniff its surroundings. My phone vibrated twice in my jacket pocket. I chose not to check it. Once the memory card was nearly full, I returned to the car and sat with the camera in my lap. I reviewed the images on the tiny screen. They were some of the best work I had done in months, perhaps longer. I started the car and drove towards the studio. There were many things to consider: the business, the clients Tyler managed, the future with Liz. None of these matters were resolved. None would be easy, straightforward, or swift. The morning illumination was still commendable. With photographs as proof, I had witnessed its charm. On the front passenger seat, my camera case from the weekend housed the memory card from midday. Since capturing those images on Saturday evening, I hadn't revisited them. The cityscape outside window 412 was bathed in an orange glow. I contemplated deleting them upon reaching the studio. Then a thought crossed my mind: to keep a solitary frame.